Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Clean Transit Enterprise Board meeting. It looks like we do have a quorum on the line. Director Averill, are you ready to get started?
Yep, you bet. Thanks, Kay. I'll be standing in for our chair today, who's not going to be able to make it. So just do a real quick roll call. How do you usually handle that, Kay?
So usually I just go through and note the folks on the line. So
Okay.
Chair Fromer is excused. Present we have Director Trowbridge, Director Block, Director Garcia. I thought I saw Director Garcia. Director Jones, Director Averill, Director Takushi, Director Blinn, Director Coffin. So,
Great.
so I think we are, oh, there is Chris Jones is here. So I think we're only missing Chair Fromer.
Great. And then we'll take a look at the agenda real quick. We'll have the approval of minutes, a program admin update, enterprise financial update, planning grant award recommendations. Ooh, that'll be fun. And then adjournment. So let's get started, I guess.
Sounds good.
Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Well, I did, and I didn't have any edits from my perspective.
Make a
But
motion to approve dissent.
we have a first from Director Block on approving the minutes.
Second from Trowbridge.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. Doesn't sound like we have any discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Probably not. All right, great. Thank you very much. Kay, you're off and running.
All right, good. So just a few quick things from me. Very exciting today. We will be presenting to you our award recommendations for the first category of grants that the Clean Transit Enterprise put out. So the planning award recommendations will be presented for your approval today. The capital notice is the next one that will go out. That includes vehicles, infrastructure, and facilities. We are estimating that that will be released in January. It's possible that we will have those award recommendations to you for the February meeting, but we'll let you know once we understand kind of how many we get. But exciting that we're at this point. I feel like we've done a lot of planning, and this is where the rubbers meet in the road, and we're actually able to get some funding out on the streets. So it's an exciting day. The other thing that's on the agenda for today is our budget planning process for fiscal year 25. So the state fiscal year starts on July 1 and ends on June 30th. So we are like 7-8 months out from that, but this is when the process starts. So we will have our proposed budget being presented to you today. We need to approve that in October, and then we'll have a final budget for you in February. But if you remember, we set up our meeting cadence really around those budget decisions. So we could approve the proposed budget this time of year, and then at the February meeting, the final budget. And then just another FYI, the Clean Transit Enterprise is required to submit an annual report to the Transportation Commission, the CDOT Transportation Commission, and the state legislature, summarizing our activities for the year. So similar to last year, staff will prepare that report, and then we'll submit that to those two bodies probably in December, but I will circulate a copy of that. And if the board has any input prior to that getting submitted to those two bodies. Any questions for me? All right, I think we can go into the next agenda item.
Great. Sounds like we're off to the enterprise financial update. Kay or Cassie, want to fill us in?
Sure. So this is Kay Haraska, the enterprise controller. And as you see, these are these are through September of 2023. So reflecting the first quarter, not June of 2023. So we have July, August, and September. And as you see, most of the expenses are mainly related to staff and also attorney general fees. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any. If not, I will turn it over to Cassie to talk more in depth about the budget and other agenda items related for the financial update.
Hi, I am Cassie Rudder. I'm with the CDOT Budget Office. And if I could have you transition to the next slide for me. Thank you. So I was going to start quickly with a brief update on the revenue forecast for the retail delivery fee. So you can see this graphic kind of shows where we're at right now. We've got last fiscal year finalized results for revenue collections from fiscal year 23. We had forecasted about just under 8.3 million and actually received about 9.3 million. So about $1 million additional and over what we forecasted. And then for fiscal year 24 for the current year, we've got about 9.3 million forecasted. And for fiscal year 25 so far, we're forecasting about 9.9 million. So we're going to be monitoring the collections over these next few months, and our next forecast update will be in December. So we can provide an update on the revenue forecast at that time. There's a chance that we may revise it upward a little bit, depending on how these next couple months go. But generally that revenue is coming in pretty strong. So we may see an upward adjustment. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So as Kay mentioned, we are kicking off our process to develop the fiscal year 25 budget for CDOT. So this is the timeline that we follow generally. It's kind of driven by some statutory deadlines that we are required. So we have a November 1 deadline to submit the legislative budget. And then our proposed budget for CDOT, we have to submit by December 15th. So kind of moving backwards, that means the TC has to adopt that budget at their November meeting. And then our final budget is required to be submitted on April 15th to the legislature and governor's office. So again, moving backwards, that means the TC has to adopt that final budget during their March meeting. So our process just sort of kind of moves backwards from there. So we're currently in the process of developing that proposed budget. The TC will review it this month for their October meeting and then adopt it for November. So pretty much when it comes to the enterprises for clean transit, what we would be asking is that you know, whatever budget gets adopted by the board, we will work into our materials, into our process. And so, and actually, if you can go to the next slide for me. Thank you. So we produce a budget allocation plan for CDOT, and it includes CDOT and the enterprises. We have a few different reports and appendices. The primary report that we produce is called the Revenue Allocation Plan, also called the One Sheet. And for that report, we just show the revenue that we're forecasting for the given fiscal year and how that revenue will get allocated across all the department's programs. And so in all of our reports and in our narrative, we like to include the enterprises so that we can kind of show the full picture of transportation budget and funding across for the state of Colorado. So we like to make sure that any budget proposals, any changes to the budget, anything that the board approves for the Clean Transit Enterprise, that we can kind of incorporate that into our budget reports so that we can kind of have that full picture. And then if you wouldn't mind going to the next one. Thank you. I also wanted to touch quickly on the legislative budget process. Since Clean Transit Enterprise is annually appropriated by the legislature, just worth pointing out that they, of course, have a fully different process, different timeline, different requirements for setting that legislative budget process. So right now they're working on the governor's November 1 request. Right now our request for clean transit is tied to what we're forecasting for revenue for fiscal year 25, which again is $9.9 million. So that's what's currently in the November 1 request. And then from here, there's an opportunity to request a revision to that budget for the January 2nd timeframe. So the governor's supplemental and budget amendment request gets submitted to the legislature January 2nd. So if you wanted to request any changes to that, that would be our opportunity for doing that. And then after that, the Joint Budget Committee does figure setting before they introduce the long bill. So that would be sort of the time frame for those budget decisions to get made for the legislative budget process. And if there are no questions, that is it for me.
Anybody have, it's like, Director Garcia.
Hello, sorry I was late there, just trying to get up to speed. Can you explain the process on why this is going through the legislative budget process? I'm a little
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so this enterprise is treated a little differently than some of our other enterprises. So that it's a good question. So the Clean Transit Enterprise is it's annually appropriated by the legislature. So instead of being what's called continuously appropriated, like most of the CDOT budget is and our other enterprises, this one is annually appropriated, which means the legislature sets the annual budget amount through the state long bill. So they provide spending authority, which is the amount of money that you're authorized to spend out of that Clean Transit Enterprise Fund on an annual basis. So we are kind of tied to that threshold. Whatever they authorize in the long bill, that is the limit on what can be spent in a given year, assuming there's enough revenue to spend that much.
And
And
so
it's
that,
just because that's the way the statute was written, is that it was
understood.
subject to-
So,
yeah.
Great, thank you. In terms of then funding grant requests, how does that play into the budget process?
Yeah, so the way that we have this set currently is we have the spending authority request sort of set to what we're anticipating for revenue. We've been talking, I think that it would be at some point a good transition to start maybe forecasting what the enterprise is anticipating in terms of encumbrances. And so that we can maybe make that, the basis of our request going forward so that we can ensure that you have enough spending authority to cover those commitments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Then
Does anybody
I'll
else
jump
have any
in.
questions? Looks good to me.
And then I'll jump in and kind of show you what the actual budget looks like, because Cassie helped with kind of the background and why we're doing what we're doing and what the timelines are. But if we go to the next slide, I can show you what our proposed budget is. So staff has suggested that this be our budget for the coming year, and I've highlighted a few areas where there are changes from prior years or adjustments. So as Cassie mentioned, we have the 9.9 million in revenue at the top. There's a category around administration and agency operations. The salary cost is a little bit higher than prior years, but I think that is probably reflective of the fact that we've moved from planning to do things to actually doing them, and that requires more staff and more time to do that. So the salary budget is based on what we think will be around 50 grants a year. So we'll see how that plays out, but that number is higher than in prior years. There's a small reduction in professional services. We had previously had $125,000 on that line. We haven't used any of the professional services money. I think it's still prudent to keep some in that category. We can again always move it around if we need to, but we did reduce that out of the gate this year. And then travel and meeting expenses. In prior years, we had budgeted for, I think, 6 in-person meetings. As the board knows, we've been doing these meetings largely virtually. We have moved to a quarterly cadence, so I budgeted for 2 in-person meetings a year should we want to take that option, as opposed to 6. And that leaves us with our 10% contingency reserve, which was part of our CTE plan that we put together from the get-go. The contingency funds are again for like project escalation costs or situations where maybe an agency comes to us with a project, and then when they actually go out to bid for vehicles or infrastructure, it comes in higher, and that would give us a cushion to be able to continue to fund that project even if costs increase. So that's really the intention for the contingency reserve fund. And then $8.3 million left for program funds, which is our grant program. So planning vehicles, infrastructure, and facilities. So 6% of the funds are going toward administration and agency operations. The other 94% are slated for our grant portfolio and the contingency fund. So in terms of the proposed budget that we're requesting your input on and approval of today, this is what we're proposing for fiscal year 25.
Hey, Kay, about how much of the staff salary's gone up from last year to this year? Just for a point of reference.
So I don't have that number in front of me, but I think if we, let me just look back. So we did reduce the salary costs as part of budget adjustments over the course of the year because the grant programs didn't stand up as quickly as we were expecting. So last year's staff salaries probably aren't going to be a great projection of what we're going to experience.
That's kind of what I was
forward.
wondering. Okay.
But I think we do have our first round of grant reviews under our belts. And I think that, again, this is based on kind of experience with about 50 grants per year, everything from the committee that reviews it to the folks who budget it, to the contracts, people who write the contracts, to the grant managers who oversee those projects and pay invoices all the way through closeout. So.
Cool. Okay. Well, we have
I had a question.
Sorry, Mark.
That's right. In our prior year, we showed earlier some of our collections. Do we maintain a fund balance, or how is that tracked or allocated?
Might be a question for Cassie.
Yeah, I can address that one. So any revenue above what gets spent it remains in the fund. So yeah, that's a good point. We can start reporting on the fund balance in addition to the revenue going forward.
That would be helpful because we haven't really expended any grant funds per se. So we should have a sizable fund balance, I would think.
Yeah, I'll start reporting on that as well. Yep.
Thank you.
I guess with the cadence of the way that the funding opportunities come out through the Division of Transit and Rail, I think we'll always lag about a year behind when our revenue comes in. But you're correct. With this being our first round, we do have quite a bit of carry forward. So.
Thank you.
One thing I might suggest also, and believe it or not, I was just working on my agency budget before this phone call, so it's top of mind. It'd be great to see a comparison from year to year as well, just to see, so we could kind of zero in where things are changing. Just as another column there. Don't need it this year, but it's certainly nice just to see how things are evolving over time. So thank you. Anybody else have anything? Mark's got his hand up again.
Sorry, I'm bouncing between documents here. So yeah, I would concur with having additional information on prior year budgets and estimated expenditures for prior year budgets too. So I similarly was working on my budget, but we try to track the current year budget and then the current year estimated, and then the proposed budget year in one document. So it is easier to see what we budgeted, what we anticipate spending, and then what we're budgeting for in the next fiscal year. So if that could be in our budget document, that'd be helpful.
I would agree. Director Takushi.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. So is this proposed budget what will go to the legislature for their approval, I guess, in the long bill, and then it will trigger on July 1st of 2024? Is that kind of how this works together?
Yeah, so the number that's going over to the legislature with the governor's November 1 request here in a couple of weeks is just that total number. So it's the 9.9 million. They don't have the level of detail that's broken out here that Kay offered. So that will just show the line for the enterprise, and it'll show the total 9.9 million and no other detail than that. But yes, if no changes occur between now and the time that long bill is passed and signed by the governor, the amount that would be available for spending July 1 is the 9.9 million.
Great, thank you so much.
Well, I think if nobody else has any questions, we have a decision point on the agenda on this, and that's to adopt this recommended budget for the next fiscal year. I think there's a sample motion there in the packet, if anybody would care to make it.
I moved.
just had a,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just had a quick question. If we have to pass it now, can we, now that we've had some discussion on this, is this something that we need to pass at this meeting? Well, I guess being able to meet quarterly, that's probably what's backing us up against this. So never mind, I retract my question.
Okay. Back to a potential motion. Do we have a? Thought I heard somebody speaking up. If nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it.
I'll do it. I thought I heard someone else as
So did I.
well, but I move for the Clean Transit Enterprise to adopt the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget as presented by enterprise staff.
I'll second. Any further discussion on this? I don't see any hands raising. Let's take a vote. All in favor of adopting the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget as presented? Say aye.
Aye.
Raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Great. Any nays? Doesn't sound like it, so the motion carries. Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And we are now on to the next item, which is the planning grant award recommendations.
Yep, and I think this one is mine as well. So as I mentioned, Desiree, you can go to the next slide. So we are presenting our recommended awards for the planning grant category. So this notice went out in the summer, and applications were reviewed in August, beginning of September. And our review committee was made up of subject matter experts within the Division of Transit and Rail, the Office of Innovative Mobility, the Division of Transportation Development, our Environmental Justice and Equity branch. We also had colleagues from the Colorado Energy Office, the Department of Public Health, CASTA, which is the State Transit Agency Association, and the National Renewable Energy Lab. So that was our scoring committee. We received a total of 5 applications for this category. I think we were hoping for a few more, but this is more than we had received in prior years when we put out zero emission transit grant funding just through the Office of Innovative Mobility and not through the enterprise. So on par with what we've received before. But 5 applications total, $327,000, $327,500 in requests. And so I received a recommendation memo along with the director of the Division of Transit and Rail, and we're now bringing them to you for your approval because our bylaws state that the enterprise board does need to approve all the final award recommendations. So on the next slide, the applications that we received are listed here, along with the funding they were requesting, the match that they would provide, and the total project cost. And then on the following slide is our evaluation criteria. Again, this was established by the board over our meetings over the last several months. But the grants were evaluated based on these 5 criteria and the percentages that were listed. And each application was scored independently against the criteria. The applications are never compared to each other. They're compared independently against the criteria to come up with a final score and recommendation. And so the awards that we are that we would like to advance are on the next slide. So overall, the applications fell really into 3 groups. 2 of them were clearly very strong proposals, hit all the criteria in a very, very detailed and thorough way. Two of them raised some minor concerns that the committee was able to address with follow-up questions. And then one application was really a much lower quality, didn't really address the key applications elements, and we're not recommending that we fund that proposal. However, we would like to work with that entity to encourage them to apply again in the future when they can more fully answer the questions and present a cohesive project proposal to us. So with the 4 recommended awards, it would be $297,000 in CTE funds. And then I can go through each of the individual applications on the coming slides. So let's see which one is up first. Desiree, can you go to the next slide? All right, so the City of Pueblo requested $99,000. This was one that the committee recommended that we award. It was clearly aligned plan with a broader citywide effort to support renewable energy, reduce emissions, address equity issues. It was also clearly focused on one of the agencies identified potentially biggest barriers to electrification, which is the age of its existing facilities. So a very strong proposal. And again, one of the larger transit fleets in Colorado who could see some real benefit from a planning study. The next request is the Laredon Hall Society for Exceptional Children and Adults. It was a $90,000 grant request. This was a very ambitious application, also has some increased urgency since they're receiving some funding for implementation through Excel and DRCOG. The transition to zero emission vehicles in this demand response setting, they have smaller vans and cutaways, could be quite challenging, but the planning effort we think is going to be really critical to them before they make that switch. So really a strong proposal here as well, and one that the committee recommended to award. The next one is the Neighbor to Neighbor Volunteer Chafee Shuttle. This was a $40,500 grant request. The committee is recommending an award to this group as well. They're going to study a large rural transit service territory. It's going to be an area that certainly is going to present some challenges, but we think also could provide a really good model for other rural agencies in the future. There's a very strong commitment in this proposal toward bilingual engagement, given the high Spanish speaking population in this area. So we did initially have some concerns about local match and some partnerships, but we were able to address those with some follow-up questions and think that this will be as well a very strong proposal for the board's consideration. Next is the Teller Senior Coalition. So this is a $30,500 grant request. The committee did recommend that we deny this application and encourage them to apply in a future year. It was lacking specificity, had very short, vague answers, didn't really clearly communicate the intention or the rationale of what the planning effort would entail. They also indicated that the county was not necessarily supportive, which raised some concerns for the committee around the viability of the planning effort if there was no buy-in from leadership. So the committee felt that the applicants would benefit from talking through their goals and some of their specific questions with our staff or with CASTA so that they can get to the point next year of making a more competitive proposal that has the detail that we need to really evaluate it against the criteria, because again, it was very, very brief and difficult for the committee to understand what we would actually be funding. And then the final proposal is Via Mobility. They had a $67,500 request. The committee is recommending an award here. So the agency has a good deal of existing experience with EVs. They have a very ambitious plan to further build out their EV fleet in the coming years. The the proposed plan that they're doing is scenario based, recognizing that there's an unpredictable and changing nature of the EV market and transit needs more generally. It has some strong elements related to facility readiness and phasing of the project. Their equity responses weren't initially as strong as we would like, but we followed up with them and have good confidence that with some assistance from the OIM and DTR staff, that we'll be able to help ensure that equity is embedded in the planning process going forward. So those are our recommendations. And I think, I'm not sure what the next slide is. So I don't know, Desiree, it might be helpful to go back to slide 18 just so that we've got the list in front of us, and then I'd be happy to open to questions. Go ahead, Director Averill.
Thanks. Question on the Laridan Hall Society for Exceptional Children and Adults. Is that a client-based organization, or do they offer open door public transportation?
Let's see. Is Jan on the line, or Aaron? Are you familiar with the model for Laridan Hall?
They are a client-based organization. They operate within the Denver large UZA. So,
okay. I assume they're eligible under the program as a private nonprofit. I don't know what their official designation would be. That's just something I've surprisingly enough, I never heard of them before. So I'm kind of curious what their outfit's all about.
They are eligible under the criteria. Cool. Yes.
Great. Thank you. I think this is an interesting mix of applicants, honestly. We've got small rural agencies in the mix, small urban via mobility. It's great.
Good. Director Takushi.
Thank you, and I totally agree. It was really great to see the diversity of applicants, and I just wanted to compliment the committee. First of all, the great work, just kind of summarizing. I know sometimes it's a lot of work to summarize, and it was really helpful to kind of see each of these applicants in the areas that you highlighted. So thank you for all of your work on this, summarizing this for us. I also just want to say thank you for working with the applicants. I know you mentioned this on several of the slides, but it sounds like 2 that you directly work with, and then 1 in the future. I really appreciate that, because I think that there's, I think we'll probably see a growing need for that, and just kind of helping people along the way to make sure that they can get these funds. So thank you for your efforts, and thanks to the committee.
Thank you very much to the committee. I was not on the selection committee, but I heard it was a good discussion, and also very pleased with the applications that we got. Director Coffin.
Thanks, Kay. Yeah, I just want to echo the other comments. Glad to see, or happy to see, this group of applicants. I just have a question about like the, I guess the timeline for completing the studies. Like, was there a requirement that they have to be completed by a certain date, or does it vary among the applicants based on their application?
Jan, can you weigh in on that? I believe that they're on, I mean, once they get the award would be when the planning study would start. So so the timeline would start with when the award clock starts ticking. Did they propose specific timelines?
I'll have to defer to Erin, who is on the evaluation panel, is on the line if she knows of that. But from what we've seen in examples at other agencies across the state who have already undertaken a, kind of a ZEV transition plan of their own, they're a pretty short study. They do go very in depth. There's very interesting to read, and they do get shared with other agencies after they're done. But I'd say most of these can be completed within a year once they're contracted and executed.
Yep, I would agree with that. 1 to 2 years tops. They're pretty quick from a execution standpoint.
Thank you.
Don Block.
I would also like to echo the thankful to the committee that reviewed these. Having been a grant application reviewer before, sometimes this is quite a daunting task, and for this to be brand new applications with a brand new program, my hat's definitely off to those who participated. And also thank you for the summary, so we didn't have to look at all of those applications.
I'll echo that.
Good.
Any
Well, I
other
appreciate the
questions?
feedback, and if the board would like, there's a motion to approve the awards, but if there's additional discussion, obviously happy to entertain that as well.
Now, do we have any other discussion, or should we move on to making a motion, folks? I'm ready to make a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Let's make a motion.
Who's going to go first? Is that Dawn?
It is. So
All right.
I will move for the Clean Transit Enterprise to approve the 4 recommended awards in the Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Planning Grant category for a total of $297,000 in programmed funds based on the recommendations of enterprise staff.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Any further discussion before we vote? Not seeing any hands, I'd ask for those in favor to raise their hands or say aye.
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 Any nays? Doesn't sound like it. Great. What a great milestone to make some initial awards for this program.
Yeah, thank you so much. This
Good stuff.
is really exciting.
Yeah.
We've been working a lot on all the things that lead up to this. So yeah, we'll talk more about additional awards in the coming months, but this is really exciting. Thank you. And with that, I think I just have my wrap up slide. Oh, there it is. So our next meeting is calendared for Tuesday, February 20th from 1 to 3 p.m. On that meeting, we may have our capital award recommendations, which will be another exciting milestone. We'll have the fiscal year 25 final budget approval. We also will likely have an inflationary adjustment to the Clean Transit Enterprise fees. Those are due to the Department of Revenue by March 15th. So our end of February board meeting will be a good time to adjust those fees if necessary. We'll have some information on our public accountability dashboard that's required. And then any other things that you all have on your mind, please bring them to my attention, and we're happy to put them on the agenda. And with that, Director Averill, I think you have a script to close the meeting and move us to the executive.
Yes, I do. So we're going to close this meeting. We'll adjourn this one, and we're going to open an executive session. So I'm going to read a script. This is a motion to enter executive session. This is David Averill, Vice Chair of the Clean Transit Enterprise Board of Directors. It is October 10th, 2020.